Good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Corbett from the Office of the State Payroll Services, and I'd like to thank you for attending our final presentation for payroll for the 2021 Fall Conference. Today's last presentation is the OSC and agency processing schedule, and your presenter today will be Ryan Holmes. I do need to go over the housekeeping items before we get started. Your microphone will remain muted throughout the entire presentation, and if you use your headphones, you'll increase your sound quality. This session is being recorded and will be available shortly after the fall conference finishes later this week. At the top of your screen, you'll see the blue control bar that expands your display of WebEx. Questions regarding the presentation should be entered into the Q&A feature all the way over to the right. Questions will be monitored and answered at the end of the presentation. If we're not able to answer all of the questions during the scheduled time, someone can either follow up with you directly or will answer it as a part of the presentation display online at the end of the week. If you have any technical problems during this presentation, please sign out and back in using either Chrome or Edge browsers. But if you continue to have issues, you can also email the payroll mailbox at payroll@osc.ny.gov for additional assistance. You will receive a survey to complete at the end of the presentation. Please complete and submit the survey so that we can continue to improve your fall conference experience. Now I'd like to welcome Ryan, who will be your presenter.
Hey everyone, so thanks so much for coming. We're going to get started now. So for anyone here that I haven't met before, my name's Ryan Holmes. I'm a payroll analyst 1 in our audit unit. Prior to our presentation, our system support group gave their presentation on the pay-serve batch schedule. Together today, we'll be reviewing the OSC and agency processing schedule, which ties our own system schedule and deadlines to the dates and cutoffs that OSC uses in a typical pay period. So our goal here is just to help bridge that gap between our own schedule and a typical pay period, and then the way that this impacts the schedule and deadlines of an agency. So before we do get started, there's just a couple of things we wanted to go over together. So just keep in mind that OSC processes payroll for all New York State agencies. So this covers a huge array of different agencies. We've got, Office of Mental Health, Department of Corrections, CUNY and SUNY. There's multiple different agencies that we work on in a typical pay period. And then this information in the presentation is based on a normal payroll cycle for administration and institution lag and current payrolls. So in the event that we ever do have an accelerated schedule, you'll be able to see that updated information in both the bulletin board and the submission schedule, which we'll take a look at together later. And then the submission schedule for fiscal year 21 and 22 is saved in 2 different locations. Number 1 is payroll bulletin number 1895, and then the other is on the OSC website in the job aid section. And if you do have a copy of this presentation, which I believe everyone's getting, you'll get a link to both of these different sections with that copy. And then just to keep in mind, too, that in the event of an early clear, you can refer to the processing dates in the submission schedule or the pay-serve bulletin board. All right. So moving forward, we did want to give you an example of a bulletin board message for an early clear. So this was posted by OSC for the Labor Day holiday, and this was for the admin 11 lag and 12 current payrolls. So you can just note here the changes in the AI cutoff, the online cutoff, and then the time entry cutoff with the changes in dates over here. So going on here, here's an example of the submission schedule, and you can see here this covers institution 15 lag through admin 17 current. And you can see that the submission schedule includes the dates for the pay period over here, the various different cutoffs that we have for a typical pay period, and then also the check dates for the pay period. And you can also note down here, specifically with institution 16 lag through institution 15 extra lag, whenever we do have an early clear, we'll bold the early clear dates, as you can see below. So this is just to help it stand out and give you a better indication of what that accelerated schedule is going to look like for that pay period. All right. So now what we want to do is bring you day by day through our processing schedule in a typical pay period. We ask that you keep in mind that OSC is consistently working on 2 different pay cycles simultaneously. This presentation focuses on one pay cycle. However, in a later slide, we'll illustrate this overlap a little bit better. So as our system support group mentioned in their presentation, the AI cutoff is on Tuesday. And AI files can be processed every day with the exception of Wednesdays and Sundays prior to the AI cutoff. These transactions will be available in PayServe the following day. And the NHRP 574 report is available the following day after the AI file is submitted. This report provides all transactions that fail to load via the AI file. A huge benefit to getting your AI file in is a little bit earlier is that you'll have earlier access to the NHRP 574 file and can possibly submit any corrections on an additional file prior to the cutoff. And then AI is available to OSC the following day after the AI file is processed. As Tuesday is the cutoff for submission of AI files, Wednesday would be the latest day OSC would see new AI files or AI transactions for review. So going on to the next slide. All right, so going into Wednesday, as the agency, this is your online and time entry cutoff, and I think SSG touched on this in their presentation as well. Time entry files that were sent prior to 12 p.m. on Wednesday may be processed early, and you can contact your auditor with any questions on that. But when time entry files are processed after 12 p.m., the NPay 502 rejected time entry report won't be available until Thursday, and PS query reports won't be available until Friday. Processing time entry files prior to 12 p.m. allows for earlier access to the NPay 502 report, which will also allow time entry transactions to be available in PS query by Thursday. So this is another huge benefit to being able to get your time entry file in prior to 12 p.m. And then OSC, so this is when we begin the audit process on time entry files that were processed early. So typically on Wednesday in the afternoon, we'll start to see any queries pertaining to time entry for any files that were sent to us early. So now we're moving into Thursday. So Thursday for the agency, this is when your Control D and Pay 502 warning and rejected time entry report is available for review if your time entry file was processed after 12 p.m. on Wednesday. The NPay 502 warning and rejected time entry report provides any time entry transactions submitted via the time entry file which could not be loaded into the system. Should any late entries be necessary due to the rejected time entry report, agencies should contact their auditor for permission to direct enter these payments into PayServe. So just keep in mind that regardless of purpose, all late transactions require auditor approval. So like I mentioned in the previous slide, this is a huge benefit to getting your time entry file in earlier because this can avoid rejected time entry corrections after our cutoff. Okay. So now moving into Thursday and Friday for OSC. So transactions continue to be audited. We do understand that there may be times when a late entry is needed. However, at this point in the schedule, paying employees correctly and avoiding overpayments are the #1 priorities. Even so, these late transactions require an auditor's permission prior to entry, as it can and does adversely affect the production process by causing errors to an employee's record and may lead to processing delays. So late transactions other than those previously noted may have to wait until the next cycle, and they'll be paid retroactively pending approval for late entry by a respective OSC auditor. And then late transactions entered without permission are susceptible to deletion. So if the auditor is unable to appropriately audit the transaction and no permission was granted to enter it, OSC will delete the payment for reentry next pay period. and you can contact your auditor with any questions on that. We do want to point out that should any deletions or changes be made, these will appear on your agency correction reports, and we're going to touch on that a little bit later in a future slide. All right. So now we're moving on to Monday. So Monday for OSC is when we begin the review of any retroactive adjustments. So the retro program runs every night except for Tuesdays, and when retroactive transactions are entered, agencies can review the retro pay screens the following day, with the exception of retro transactions that were entered Tuesday, which will be available on Thursday. So this is, again, a huge benefit for any agencies using the retro screen for their overpayment calculations or to calculate any money due to an employee. So when your transactions are entered earlier, if you do need this information, this is when you can expect to see that available to you in the retro screens. On top of that, OSC also reviews 30-plus additional queries, which can and do have hundreds of results. And then we clear all transactions in the system for the current cycle in the afternoon. And just to clarify too, clear is the stage in the pay period in which all time entry and job request transactions have been approved. So at this point, we no longer expect any further transactions to be submitted, which again is why we really want to press the importance of making sure your auditor's in the loop for any necessary late transactions. All right, so going into Tuesday. So Tuesday for the agency, no new information should be added without prior approval, only changes requested by OSC staff. So if a transaction is necessary to prevent either an overpayment or a $0 check, please notify your auditor ASAP for approval to enter. They have to be aware of anything like that that's going to be entered. OSC at this point, we continue to review retros, so we get additional retro queries going into Tuesday. We resolve the issues that have kicked out of the system from clearing. We certify employees between PayServe and NICEP, and then this day marks the beginning of the next cycle. So while the rest of our discussion is going to focus on just one pay period, we want you to keep in mind that we'll be beginning the next pay period on the opposite cycle while we complete our review of the current cycle that we're clearing. So going into Wednesday, so as the agency, agencies must not enter transactions for the payroll that we are confirming are closing at this point, as it will create a system error and delay or shut down paycheck processing. Keep in mind that the system's not going to recognize any changes entered into job and additional pay. So to correct employees' paychecks, such as an overpayment and or a $0 check, manual changes will need to be made by OSC. So if an emergency transaction is necessary per the above circumstances, you must notify your OSC auditor immediately. We really want to emphasize the importance of making sure your auditor's in the loop for these transactions. As I just mentioned, just entering it into PayServe isn't going to pull it into the check. Your auditor really needs to be aware, because should an employee fall into this situation, we want to make sure we can make any manual changes to Payline wherever it's necessary. All right, so continuing on with Wednesday. The pay calc unit confirms the payroll cycle that we cleared on Monday, and below is the processing schedule we use for confirmed day. But just note that this is the schedule we aim to meet, but there can be delays in the confirmed schedule under certain circumstances, so the schedule may be pushed a little bit later depending on what's going on with that pay period. Should there be a manual change to Payline, you can expect that change to be reflected in the paycheck into the next calc cycle that you can see below. But again, keep in mind, if we're running a little late that pay period, the time you see it may be a little bit later than what you see here. And then past that point, audit staff reviews AC 230s to clear up any overpayments that are still outstanding. So on the next page, we have here a table to try and summarize the last 3 days. So for those agencies that are reviewing their paychecks each pay period, you might notice that certain payments load into the paycheck on different days. So we wanted to give you a table that displays when you can expect to see each type of payment in a paycheck. So on Monday, you'll be able to see RGS that loads in from job and then any additional pay that was approved for the employee. And then on Tuesday, you'll be able to see any time entry, which does include RGO. So if you do have an RGO for the employee, you might see both RGS and RGO on Tuesday. But then going into Wednesday, you'll see both retro that we left on at OSC to be paid to the employee that pay period. And if the employee had RGO, this is when the RGS would be shut off. So this is when you can expect to just see the RGO in that person's paycheck. All right. And now going into Thursday. So Thursday for the agencies in the afternoon is when you can begin entering data for your next pay period. But keep in mind that time entry transactions can be entered starting the Tuesday prior. So you might notice that on Monday in the afternoon, we'll see time entry gray out for the pay period. And then Tuesday, the next day, you can start entering any time entry payments for that next pay period. OSC, we confirm special pay groups with the pay calc unit. And then audit staff reviews any additional query results for the payroll that was just confirmed. And these queries will be post-audited, so any changes that are necessary will need to be made in the following pay period. So now moving into Friday. So Friday is when we close the cycle for the pay period. So as the agency, Control D report and Pay 776, which is also your correction sheets, should be reviewed by agencies for corrections done in time entry, additional pay, job, workers' compensation, tax, and general comments. Please ensure your NPay 776 is reviewed ASAP. Should you notice anything that you're either questioning or disagree with, notify your auditor as soon as possible so we can take a look at it into the next pay period. And then for OSC, this is when we get any final query results for the pay cycle that was just confirmed on the prior Wednesday. And then we run and review these by audit staff. So again, just like Thursday, any query results we're getting for the pay cycle that was just confirmed are being post-audited, so any changes won't be effective until the next payroll cycle. All right. So as we discussed earlier, we wanted to illustrate that overlap between pay periods to kind of help clarify where OSC is seeing certain things and when we're working certain cycles. So starting with institution 15 lag, you can see that we begin the pay cycle on Tuesday, 10/19, and then we continue our audit for the remainder of the week. Starting on 10/25, we begin the process of clear and then going through the week certification and confirm for institution 15. But in addition to this, we also begin the audit of admin 15 lag as well. So the same day that we're working on certification for institution 15, we're also getting our first admin 15 queries in the afternoon. And then continuing throughout the week, we finalize institution 15 lag while also auditing admin 15 lag as well. Sorry, hit that next one a little bit early. But we can see that admin 15 lag continues into the next week. So while it's not illustrated on this table, that overlap also continues with institution 16 lag as well. So while we're doing certification for admin 15 lag, we're also starting a review of institution 16 lag as well. And we ask that agencies keep in mind as well that auditors will always prioritize the cycle that we're about to clear and confirm. So if your agency is regarding an agency on the opposite cycle, we may be unable to review and answer your question until we begin working in that respective cycle. So for example, if we're currently clearing institution 15 lag and you're in an admin cycle, we may not be able to look at your question for admin until the next day or the day after, depending on what's going on with that institution cycle. All right. So thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. This concludes our presentation. I'll take a look now if we had any questions that we weren't able to answer during the presentation, and I'll take a look. But otherwise, thanks so much, everyone, for coming, and we hope you enjoyed.
Hi, I'd also like to thank everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Ryan, for your presentation. We will leave the Q&A box up for about 5 minutes. After that, if you do have any other questions, you can email them to the payroll.earnings@osc.ny.gov. Thank you. Okay, I think we can now end the presentation. There don't seem to be any questions. Thank you all again for joining us for this presentation and for all of the presentations we've had over the last 2 weeks. This concludes payroll services portion of the 2021 Fall Conference. Thank you. Have a good day.